Today we're talking the top buys and sells for fantasy football ahead of week 3. And when you're making your deals this week, be sure to use our trade calculator at yardsperfantasy.com. It's fully customizable, it's free to use, and you'll never lose a trade again. Find it now at yardsperfantasy.com/trade-calculator. The injuries are stacking up in San Francisco. First, it was Christian McCaffrey who missed week 1 and then was placed on IR. He's now expected to be out until at least mid to late October. Then we get the news this week that Deebo Samuel is expected to miss multiple games with a calf injury. That takes an offense that is loaded with weapons and condenses it down to a much more consolidated target share. The ball is going to 3 players. It's Jordan Mason, Brandon Aiyuk, and George Kittle. For Aiyuk, he's gotten off to a slow start, but that was kind of expected after missing all of training camp and preseason with his contract situation. But he's now had 2 weeks to get reacclimated, and he's going to be the primary target in the passing game. And for Kittle, we often complain about his volatility, but when one or more of the weapons in that offense are out, he has consistently produced at a high level. In fact, when Deebo Samuel missed weeks 7 and 8 last year, Kittle combined for 14 catches on 18 targets for 227 yards. I'm trying to take advantage and buy both of these guys this week, especially with the upcoming matchup against the Rams, who are giving up fantasy points in buckets right now. Trey McBride is the tight end 6 in PPR scoring after 2 weeks. He's had 2 underwhelming fantasy performances with 8 and 12.7 fantasy points. However, in both games, Trey McBride has continued his elite role from last year. He's played a ton of snaps, he's run a ton of routes, and he's had target shares of 29% and 28.6%. He's third among all tight ends in targets and second to only Hunter Henry in target share. At a position that is so hard to find consistent, reliable production, we want a guy who's going out and commanding that level of opportunity on a weekly basis. The fantasy points are absolutely coming for Trey McBride. Quarterback Kyler Murray has played well, especially in week 2, which should only enhance our confidence that Trey McBride is going to start producing as the top 3 tight end that we drafted him to be. My prediction, he's going to end the season as the tight end 1. Anthony Richardson was awesome in week 1 and then he face planted in week 2. But what he gave us in week 1 was exactly why we were drafting him so much this summer. He threw multiple touchdowns, ran for another, and he picked up 56 yards on the ground. He even showed off his rocket launcher of an arm with 3 completions of more than 50 yards. Things came back down to earth in week 2 on the road against an underrated Packers defense. And while there was certainly cause for concern, we have to remember this was just the 6th career start for Anthony Richardson. He's played in 6 games. He's thrown fewer than 140 passes. It's not crazy to think that he's going to have some games where he looks like a rookie quarterback. If you're okay living with that here and there, then I encourage you to go out and buy him from the manager in your league who is a little bit worried right now. That's because Anthony Richardson can win you weeks unlike any quarterback not named Lamar or Jaylen or Josh. He's an unbelievable rusher with Cam Newton-like skills down at the goal line. We've already seen the arm talent. He has the weapons, and he has one of the sharpest offensive coaching staffs in the NFL. I really believe week 1 is going to be what we get more often than not. You just got to be able to accept a few duds here and there and enjoy that league-winning upside. It's only been 2 weeks, but I'm ready to wave the white flag. I just might have been wrong about Jameson Williams. The bad vibes from his first 2 years are gone, and it's nothing but fun football and big plays for the former Alabama superstar. But what I love the most is he's not just running straight lines down the field. The Lions are utilizing his speed in a number of ways. In addition to the vertical stuff, they're putting him on shallow crosses, deep crosses, corners, and posts to find multiple ways to get him open and utilize his elite speed. Through 2 weeks, Jameson Williams has 20 targets, which ranks number 5 among all NFL players. That has come on target shares of 32.1% and 20.8%. He accounted for a third of the team's air yards in week 2 while running the same number of routes as Amon-Ra St. Brown. While we usually recommend buying low on players, it is absolutely okay to buy high. And I've seen enough through 2 weeks to confidently say that Jameson Williams is worth every penny it's going to cost to acquire him. And if you believe Jameson Williams finds the end zone in week 3 against Arizona, then you can play this pick'em on Underdog Fantasy. Lock in your pick now and use promo code YARDSPER to get a free pick and a deposit offer of up to $1,000. That's promo code YARDSPER on Underdog. Let's get it. The question all summer was which Bengals running back would be the one to roster in fantasy football. Would it be Zack Moss or would it be Chase Brown? I was actually leaning Chase Brown because he was projected to play more in the passing game and he was the more explosive runner of the two. Unfortunately, I didn't fully appreciate the difference between Moss and Brown in pass protection. I was hoping we would see a step forward from Brown in that area and the coaches would trust him enough to put him on the field in those situations. But that has not been the case. In fact, this backfield hasn't even been close through the first 2 weeks. Moss has outsnapped Chase Brown 84-30 through 2 weeks while playing 80% of the snaps in week 2. Moss has run 40 routes to Brown's 13 and has a 72.2% opportunity share to Brown's 27.8%. Zack Moss is the clear workhorse in an offense that's only going to get better from here. We're not buying him expecting we're going to get a top 12 running back in fantasy football, but he can be a steady RB2 for the duration of the season. I got 5 bonus buys I want to get to you real quick. The first is Braylon Allen. He's an elite handcuff with a smidge of standalone value. Rachaad White, he may be inefficient as a runner, but he's an elite receiving running back. His fantasy managers are trying to get out right now. We talked about being okay with buying high. Rashee Rice is a buy high. He's getting volume in the Kansas City Patrick Mahomes offense. Same thing with Ramondre Stevenson. He's the focal point of the offense, and the receiving production is back. And that New England offensive line is exceeding expectations. Then we get Terry McLaurin. He's still the wide receiver 1 in Washington. He's overcome quarterback play his entire career. Things will get better. Don't give up yet. Before we get to my sells for week 3, if you're enjoying this video, if you find it at all valuable, please hit that like button and subscribe to the channel. And drop your trade questions in the comments. Or hit me up in the Yards for Fantasy Discord. I'm always happy to help. You can't say I didn't warn you. There was no one more adamant that you should absolutely not be drafting Kyren Williams in the 2nd round. But for those of you who didn't listen, the sell window is still open. Despite a complete lack of efficiency in the first 2 weeks, Kyren Williams has still managed to score 14.4 and 15.2 fantasy points thanks to a pair of goal line plunges. However, Kyren Williams has been about as bad as any running back in football between the 20s. He's averaging just 2.5 yards per carry. He's evaded 1 tackle on 37 total touches, and he's yet to have a single run reach 10 yards. His yards per touch and his yards created per touch are both outside the top 40 running backs according to playerprofiler.com. Maybe you want to blame the offensive line, and that would be at least somewhat fair, considering it is by far the most injury-depleted unit in the NFL. However, things are not going to get any better on that front anytime soon, so he's going to continue to run behind a struggling front 5. And then we also have Blake Corum lingering in the shadows. After not seeing the field in week 1, the rookie started week 2 pretty strong with a 41-yard kick return. He also ended up taking 8 carries for 28 yards on offense as well. If you followed anything that I did in the summer, you already know that I'm all in on Blake Corum, and I think he's the most talented running back in Los Angeles. I've never been more confident in that take than I am right now. We're going to see Blake Corum eased into the offense a little more and a little more throughout the season. That's going to chip into that volume that Kyren Williams benefited so much from in 2023. Before that happens and before your league mates realize how truly bad Kyren Williams has been so far, put him on the trade block and get your money back for this fantasy lemon. J.K. Dobbins has been about as impressive as anyone in fantasy football to begin the season. It's not because we underestimated his talent. He's always been a good running back. It's just nobody but the Chargers expected him to be able to perform at such a high level after a series of catastrophic leg injuries over the last few years. However, Dobbins has looked as good as ever, and he's currently the RB4 in PPR scoring. He's put up more than 20 fantasy points in both games, and he's currently leading the NFL in rushing yards. With that said, though, it is absolutely impossible for J.K. Dobbins to maintain this pace in his current role. That's because while it feels like he's in a bell cow role in Los Angeles, J.K. Dobbins has yet to reach a 50% snap share in either game. In fact, he was actually outsnapped by Gus Edwards in week 2 while playing 46.4% of the snaps. He has taken just 45.8% of the running back rush attempts in the Chargers offense. He's only been targeted 4 times. Of course, this could shift given how well he's played to begin the year, but for now, he's looking like anything but a bell cow. We also need to remember that the Chargers have played 2 of the easiest run defenses in football to begin the season. It was the Raiders in week 1 and the Panthers in week 2. Who knows how things will go when the going gets tougher? And speaking of the schedule tightening up, the Chargers have the Steelers and the Chiefs over the next 2 weeks. So while I certainly don't see J.K. Dobbins going away, it's really hard to see this level of production being sustainable. I'm selling to anyone who's willing to pay an RB1 price. Who knows when or even if Tua Tagovailoa is going to be back under center in Miami. He will miss a minimum of 4 weeks after the Dolphins place him on IR, but I suspect his absence is going to be longer than that. That means it's going to be Skylar Thompson responsible for feeding Tyreek Hill and Jaylen Waddle for the foreseeable future. I'm not really sure how I feel about that. Going back to the last time we saw Skylar Thompson starting games, things got pretty ugly for Hill and Waddle. In 3 full games together in 2022, Tyreek Hill averaged 9 targets, 5.3 receptions, and 46.2 receiving yards, and he scored 0 touchdowns. It was even worse for Jaylen Waddle, who averaged 5.3 targets, 3.7 receptions, 37 receiving yards, and again, no touchdowns. And I got that from Jared Smola on Twitter. Now, of course, that was Skylar Thompson's rookie season, and things could be better this time around, but I'm not expecting to get anything close to what we're used to. Tyreek Hill is still a wide receiver 1, but he's closer to that wide receiver 8, wide receiver 10 range. But I am desperately trying to move on from Jaylen Waddle wherever I can. Every fantasy analyst on planet Earth was touting Dontayvion Wicks as a late-round sleeper this summer. Unfortunately, it's going to be difficult for the dream to become a reality when he's playing such a limited role. Despite scoring the touchdown in week 2, Wicks still only managed 11.6 fantasy points. That's after putting up a goose egg in week 1. Even with the touchdown, Wicks only was targeted 4 times, and he ran just 50% of the routes. I know it was Malik Willis at quarterback, but Dontayvion Wicks is not a main character in this offense.